My current boss, her name's Ernie Johansson. She's an amazing human, and I don't take that phrase lightly. She's a very gifted leader, an incredibly smart woman, but a very balanced human being. She took an interest in me early on and saw things in me that I didn't see in myself and encouraged me. Every now and again you get somebody that is bold enough to say to you, you're better than that. Smart enough to hold a mirror up to you in moments when you need to. And then tough enough to just say, you know what, go there, like try that. And she did all of those things, but she did it in a way that was inching you along to perfection, but not pushing you. And she was an amazing gift to myself and many others in our space. So I learned a ton from her, and I still do every day. That is like someone just opened up the sky and gave me a privilege of working with somebody like that, which I consider to be a gift. Originally a journalist, way back when, for a long time, that was my aspiration. I had the exposure at a young age to do interviews and cover a pretty gritty story, which was a serial killer. And in the process of all of that, it was horrific. And I had the pressure of getting a story on air at that time. I was doing radio work. And there was a father crying literally during the interview, asking for things not to be put on air. And then there was the reality of getting things on the wire. And honestly, I didn't care to get things on the wire, and nor do I now. And I thought in that moment, wow, like I am going to make a horrible journalist. So I took a bit of a pivot at that point, and I sort of fell into analytics thereafter. I was doing some writing work, and then I bridged over into the advertising side, and I just sort of started to specialize after that. And ultimately, I was trying to make a good decision, and it led me to data, it led me to industries with data, and then it led me to software and analytics. And then I just sort of had a love affair with finding the truth in data. I have a love of arts in all forms, from painting, which I do an awful lot of, through to design, visual arts, gardening, cooking, any kind of artistic flights to me are as important as anything analytical, and I think you got to stretch your mind in both ways. When I think about designing of experiments, when I think about designing of a customer experience with journey analytics, all of that is tugging a little bit on a right brain and then complementing it with the left brain. And I think that the left part of one's brain and the typical analyst and the logician in a person works very effectively, and the analytics becomes implementable when the actual design is done well and upfront and thought through. And it doesn't mean you can't be nimble and flexible in moment, but you got to think things through to its logical conclusion and think that through upfront, else you end up having some sort of aborted analytics that are very interesting but ultimately not very useful. And so I think design is an essential component of anything that you do in business, but most definitely analytics. You know, I think that business is about the matching up of a circumstance that you have with the right people in that moment. I have an amazing group of people that I work with who are smarter than me and deeper and broader, and they give me as much as I give them back. It's an iterative process. And I think that you're constantly growing as a team and changing, but life is now, right? So the team that you have now is your dream team, and I don't take that lightly. I never really thought too much about the fact that I was a woman. And then the time it hit me was about 4 years ago. I was in New York. I was speaking at a conference, and one of the reporters from Forbes approached me and said, listen, we wanted to do a story about women in analytics. This is not my thing, you know. I would just rather do than profile it. Concurrent to that, I'm part of a academic board at Queen's, and we study obviously the number of women that come into our program over time, and we've looked at some of the statistics, and then also girls that code and other programs like that. And when I looked at the combination of all the things, like what was coming from an environmental perspective, what was happening academically, what it felt like for girls to be in situations where there were few of them and they were surrounded by other boys, I learned something different, and I thought a lot of those stereotypes still existed. You know, sometimes shocks you. Every now and again you wake up and you go, really? Like, that's where we are? And it only started to bother me when I thought about like the kids in my family, my nieces and nephews, and what happens for them. It actually doesn't bother me as much for me. If something is standing in my way, I will overcome it. But it does bother me for folks who will follow behind. The other thing I would say is the point around how you look. Often you're judged because of that. And I'd been in a technology-based field in the software industry for years, and people would look at you funny when you showed up, and they would assume you knew certain things or didn't know certain things on account of how you looked. And you could either change it or not, and just show up as who you are and overcome it with knowledge. And that was really my preference, because I do think that there's a way for you to express yourself creatively, and I think there's a way for those things to all kind of come together. It's learned behavior, I would say, though, too. And when you study just communications, we have great coaches that help us too. Some of the things that they'll talk about is the way to get your message across has a lot to do with tone and trajectory. And I have a soft voice. And to be heard, you need to speak up. And it just wasn't in me. And I went through a period where I had a condition with my throat where I actually lost my voice. So it's actually kind of hard for me to project. But inevitably, I would get spoken over. And I didn't actually want to speak really loudly. I just didn't. It wasn't me. But I wanted to be heard. So I needed to figure out the right way to do that, to be heard with substance, but not be who I wasn't. Relationship moments with people, and some of them are simple. I've got my niece coming in a couple of weeks, and she's chosen to spend her 16th birthday with her friends here at my house. It's the fact that after all those years, that's what she's going to choose to do with her time. So they're proud in the sense that I've got that relationship with her. And there are also relationships with people I've worked with for years and have had the chance to help them in their journeys, and where they've doubled back and said, thanks, you've changed a lot for me, or you've assisted me along my way, but we're still friends. So even though they've grown and done other things, there's relationships that are maintained there. So some of the things I'm most proud of is that. Be more patient. I'm not a patient person, and I was even less so when I was younger. And listen more. People tend to answer the most of what it is that needs to be said. Others tend to answer it. You don't need to be the first one to say it. I would say that. Just hold back a little bit more. I think at its heart, it's balance, being healthy, what you eat and you're working out and all of that. Those elements are really important. The other pieces I would say is constantly learning, being able to learn something new to fill your mind and have intellectual pursuits, but equally creative pursuits. I would say that when I felt kind of most balanced, I've had that combination of things. I thought about this a lot, and I feel it's a bit bittersweet in the sense that it's sad to me on one end that we have to. I guess what I would hope for is that we're just celebrating analytics. So there's a part of me that just wants to ignore it. I'll be honest with you. I don't care who's doing it. You could be purple. I'm just happy that you're doing it because I believe so deeply in analytics. But like everything, I guess when there's folks that are in the minority, or there's fewer of them, or you need to shine a light on diversity, then there's a time to do that. I think there's a way to do it and be diplomatic. I think there's a way we can learn from each other, and it's great that we're highlighting women in analytics. There's so many great people doing analytics that I want to celebrate all of them. It is true too that there are fewer women, and I realize that they have their own challenges. I have felt that too. I also appreciate they need some help, right, every now and again, and I think it's our obligation to help people, period.